Just wondering about maybe a wrap of some sort. Does that make any sense in the future? Like a wrap of solar around either a building made of a solar panel or a wrap of a vehicle actually being the solar panel, but being the components of the vehicle itself?
I don't think so.
I'll scrap that idea.
No, it's just way better to put it on the roof, for sure. And I've really thought about this. I mean, really, and I pushed my team about, like, isn't there some way we could do it on the car? I mean, technically, if you have like some sort of transformer-like thing which will pop out of the trunk like a hard-top convertible and just like ratchet solar panels over the whole surface area of the car, extending like for the entire, say, square footage of a parking space, provided you're in the sun, that would be enough to generate about 20 to 30 miles a day of electricity. But that is for sure the expensive, difficult way to do it.
Governor Burgum.
Still thought about maybe we should, but
Once you said you want to die on Mars, why?
I don't, to be clear, I don't want to die on Mars. It's like, I mean, we're all going to die someday. And if you're going to pick some place to die, then why not Mars?
Okay.
You know, if we're born on Earth, why not die on Mars? Seems like maybe it'd be kind of exciting. But so I think given the choice of dying on Earth or dying on Mars, I'd say, yeah, sure, I'll die on Mars. But it's not some kind of Mars death wish. And if I do die on Mars, I just don't want it to be on impact.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
You know, Elon, you've been compared to Henry Ford, Richard Branson, you know, Steve Jobs. Who do you compare yourself to?
I don't really compare myself to anyone. I mean, it's not. I mean, there's certain people that I admire from history that I think are, great. Certainly, many of the scientists and engineers and literary figures and so forth. Like I'm a big fan of Ben Franklin. You know, who's a scientist and sort of thinker, and he was the kind of guy who did what needed to be done. You know, so like guys like that, I wouldn't say I compare myself in any way, but I certainly admire them. You know, there's and the big challenge is that there's an unpriced externality in the cost of fossil fuels. So the unpriced externality is the probably weighted harm of changing the chemical constituency of the atmosphere and oceans. Since it is not captured in the price of gasoline, it does not drive the right behavior. It would be like if tossing out garbage was just free, and there was no penalty. You just do as much as you want. Then, like, streets would be full of garbage. And we regulated a lot of other things like sulfur emissions and nitrous oxide emissions and that kind of thing. It's done a lot of good on that front. With CO2, it's tough because there's so many vested interests on the sort of fossil fuel side. And sometimes I feel like those guys feel like kind of hard done by because it wasn't obvious, like when they were creating their oil and gas companies, that it would be bad for the environment. And they worked really hard to create those companies. And then they feel like, well, now they're being kind of attacked on moral grounds when they didn't originally start those oil companies or build them up on bad moral grounds. And it is true that we cannot instantaneously change to a sustainable situation. But then those guys will also fight pretty hard to slow down the change. And that's really where I think is morally wrong.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the origins of Tesla.
Sure. So with, as mentioned, I was quite interested in electric cars from when I was doing my undergrad physics. And in fact, I originally came out to California to do a PhD at Stanford in applied physics and material science to work on ultracapacitors in electric cars. So it was a long-standing interest of mine, and the internet kind of put that on
hold for a few years, but then after PayPal, I decided I wanted to get back into electric vehicles and make something happen in that arena, particularly since GM had come out with the EV1, and I thought, okay, well, there's not really a need for a startup company to develop electric cars because obviously GM is going to create the EV2 and the EV3. That's a logical sequence, and we get increasingly get better and better with each iteration, and so not really need for a new company in that arena. But actually what happened was that after California changed the regulations to no longer require electric cars, GM recalled all the EV1s, and then just to make sure that nobody could get them back, they crushed them in a lot somewhere. And in fact, while they were being crushed, the people who'd been the EV1 owners who did not want those cars recalled actually held a candlelit vigil as though somebody was getting executed, basically. And it's like, that just seemed extremely crazy that GM would ignore this because it's quite rare for people to hold a candlelit vigil about a product. And particularly a GM product. So, so if people are doing that, you should really pay attention. But they wanted to just sort of erase all that, and so I thought, okay, well, we've got to try to create an electric car company. But it wasn't as though in creating these companies that we thought that we would be successful. I thought that the most likely outcome was failure. But it was still worth doing, even though the odds of success were low. In fact, even for SpaceX, originally what I started doing was not creating a rocket company, but actually was going to do a small mission to Mars, which was just a philanthropic mission where we would send a small greenhouse with seeds and dehydrated gel, and it would, upon landing, hydrate the gel, and you'd have this cool picture of green plants on a red background. And the public tends to respond to precedents and superlatives. So this would be the first life on Mars, furthest that life's ever traveled, and you'd have this great money shot of green plants on a red background. So, yeah, I thought that would get people's attention. So, but the expectation for that was no return. So I thought we wouldn't get any, we'd just spend the money on that, and it wouldn't happen. And it was in the process of trying to do that mission that I concluded that I'd made a mistake with respect to my assumptions about why are there no people on Mars. Because I started off thinking that it was because there was a lack of will, and that if you could reignite the will, then it would happen. So my initial thing even with the space side was really to get the public excited and to get people to essentially vote NASA to have a bigger budget. That was my goal initially. But as I tried to do that mission, I was able to compress the costs of the satellite or the spacecraft and the greenhouse and everything and the communication costs, but I wasn't able to compress the rocket costs. And I actually tried, had some adventures along the way trying to get a good deal on rockets. I actually flew to Russia 3 times to try to buy some ICBMs. And I negotiated a deal too, actually. But after the 3rd trip to Russia, which was very, very strange because I was like there in 2001, 2002, and I thought, well, if we do this, well, it's going to generate a lot of interest, but if there's still a fundamental technology issue with rocket transport, then it's not going to solve the problem. So I decided that it was not a question of will, it was a question of way. And if people thought there was a way to do it without it fundamentally affecting their standard of living, then they would support such an endeavor, particularly in the United States, which the United States is a nation of explorers. I mean, it's a distillation of the human spirit of exploration. People came here from other places, and so I think that exploratory spirit is actually very strong. But people need to know that it's possible, this can be done without materially affecting their standard of living. So,
I mean, what you've accomplished is amazing. Between linking up with the space station on launches, and the Model S winning Car of the Year and being just a phenomenon. But a good, yes.
I think one of the biggest risks for autonomous vehicles is somebody achieving a fleet-wide hack. In principle, if somebody was able to hack, say, all of the autonomous Teslas, they could say, just as a prank, they could say, like, send them all to Rhode Island from across the United States. And they'll be like, well, okay, that would be the end of Tesla. And there'll be a lot of angry people in Rhode Island, that's for sure. So we got to make super sure that a fleet-wide hack is basically impossible, and that if people are in the car, that they have override authority on whatever the car is doing. So if the car is doing something wacky, you can press a button that no amount of software can override. That will ensure that you gain control of the vehicle, and cut the link to the servers. So that's pretty fundamental. Within the car, we actually have, even if somebody gains access to the car, there are multiple subsystems within the car that also have specialized encryption. So the powertrain, for example, has specialized encryption. So even if somebody would gain access to the car, they cannot gain access to the powertrain or to the braking system. But it is my top concern from a security standpoint at Tesla is making sure that fleet-wide hack or any vehicle-specific hack can occur. They have the same problem with cell phones. It's kind of crazy today that we live quite comfortably in a world that George Orwell would have thought was super crazy. Like we all carry a phone with a microphone that can be turned on really at any time without our knowledge, with a GPS that knows our position, and a camera, and kind of all of our personal information. We do this willingly, and it's kind of wild to think that that's the case. So the phone, like Apple and Google, kind of have the same challenge of making sure there cannot be a fleet-wide hack or a system-wide hack of phones, or a specific hack. So that's our top concern. Yeah, it's going to become a bigger and bigger concern. I think Tesla's, I don't want to tempt fate here, but Tesla's pretty good at software compared to the other car companies. So I think it's going to be a bit like an even bigger challenge for the other car companies to ensure security. Yeah.
As far as role models, I think, there's obviously some of the obvious role models. I think Edison was certainly a role model, probably one of the biggest role models.
Did you study Edison's life?
Yeah, I read books about him, absolutely. And it's an interesting contrast, like Edison versus Tesla, because interesting, the car company is called Tesla. And the reason it's called Tesla is because we use an AC induction motor, which is an architecture that Tesla developed. And the guy probably deserves a little more play than he gets in current society. But on balance, I'm a bigger fan of Edison than Tesla, because Edison brought his stuff to market and made those inventions accessible to the world, whereas Tesla didn't really do that. Right. So he'd certainly be a big one. I think the great technologists, Steve Jobs at Apple, Bill Gates. I actually thought Disney was a pretty good innovator.